Hey y'all, it's Z Infante, voiceover artist and host of Raise the Gain, a new YouTube series featuring interviews with voiceover artists you don't want to miss. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel at Raise the Gain here on YouTube, or you can follow me on Instagram at ZRInfante so you can stay tuned for upcoming guests and announcements. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 2 of Raise the Gain featuring Zach Barrick, the incredibly knowledgeable, heartfelt uncle and talent that I've had the privilege of working with before. Zach and I were both featured in the incredible Netflix TV show Dead End Paranormal Park, where he plays the star Barney, who's this incredible trans-masked character, teenager who's just coming out and becoming the person that they are. We're also featured as queer characters on Atypical Artists, The College Tape, available on all the streaming platforms that you listen to podcasts on. Zach is also well known for their work in Spider-Man Far From Home, where they are one of the first out trans artists to be featured in the Marvel Universe. Zach and I talk about so many incredible things, including family and the industry and how we make change and how we heal the shame that has been put on us, whether we're queer or we're not. Just being able to have an open mind and an open heart. And so without further ado, here is my interview with Zach Barrick. Yeah, so I went to my niece's kindergarten graduation yesterday, and it was astonishing. She was the bravest, and then she led the ABCU Laters. It was very cute. It was very endearing. Do you have any young people in your life that you're
I
like,
have two nieces who I'm very, very, very obsessed with. One of them is like just had her first year of school, which felt so surreal. I think it was preschool. So I think she starts kindergarten because she's going to be 4 this year. She'll probably be one more year preschool. And then, so I'm like, it's really surreal that she's even in school. I mean, she was an early talker, but like it feels so different than learning to read and write. You know what I mean?
very much so?
And then my younger niece is so shy and so cute, and she has these like bushy little eyebrows and kind of always furrows them. I love them. I don't know, my partner and I always talk about like yes and no days for kids. And like when I'm with my nieces, it's like yes days, yes days, yes days. And then I go to like an event where there's children and I'm like, no. Because I don't know if this is your experience, but I'm like, my kids are the best kids.
Indeed, indeed. I do have a feeling of my niece's genius being like my
Yeah.
inspiration.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of young students as an arts educator. So like it's a lot of, I can deal with it at work, but I can't deal with it at home. My niece is
Yeah.
wonderful. Like she's very well behaved. She's a kid, you know what I mean? Like she's
Yeah.
wild. Um, but being in the classroom with like kindergarten through third graders, whew,
It's different. Yeah.
it's a wild thing. It is like the potential and the promise that they have as children is wonderful.
Yeah.
But they're also so loud, so germy, and I'm like, high five. I'm also big on consent now with kids in particular. I'm like, do you want to like, if they're like coming to give me a hug, I'm like, do you want a hug? Do you like, rather than assuming that that's what they want?
Yeah.
Because I think growing up, I'm curious about your experience, especially being a queer person. When don't they ask us about being queer when we're queer? I love you. But as a queer person, bodily autonomy, right? Being able to say like, yes, I do want a hug. No, I don't want a hug.
Yeah.
Like, did you ever have that experience growing up and or as an adult where you're like, boundaries?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was watching my niece. So Daria, my older niece, she when she was a baby, I watched, and I think this is just like watching cycles break um through like generations, like poor cycles break. And I watched my brother, she had stuff all over her face, and he was like, "You have schmutz. Can I like wipe your face?" And she was like, "Yep." And I was like, "Oh my God, you asked her if you could wipe her face." A thing that is almost like, I mean, would be so understandable for a parent to just wipe the face. Like that's just like your kid's face is messy. They're a true baby. They barely have the word yes in their vocabulary, but like started early. And I felt really shocked by that, which makes me think, it's foreign to me. And I just thought it was so cool. And I really love, like, when I look back, I don't think that I was like, I talk about this often. Like, I love my brothers. We have a very close relationship. My mom and I have gotten really close as I've been an adult, but I never felt like I had a single like modicum of control as a child. Um, it always felt like everything was a no when it came to anything that validated me. And I don't hold it against anybody. I think it's really hard to know how to operate, especially when my parents were doing it, the time they were doing it at. Not that I'm like that old, but certainly we weren't talking about like transness or anything. And so I wanted to wear boy clothes and my parents like let me, but there was always an air of eventually, you'll grow out of it, or like the expectation was there. And my mom, I'm so grateful she has grandchildren because Daria is such a girly girl, and I can tell that my mom is like, yay, I get to buy like dresses for a child because she really wanted a daughter, and then it just didn't happen. I was like, no, thank you. Um, and so yeah, I don't know. I like think things work out like that. I think you get to because I instead of being like frustrated that there were these like gender roles thrust upon me, I think of it as my mom is someone, she's a doctor who became like a woman doctor during a time when that was still like she was still not like I think in her medical school class probably the minority. I mean, I think this was sort of the start of affirmative action vis-a-vis like women going to college. Also not to age her. But she lived through a lot of like monumental like legislation. So she was sort of at the beginning of like more women being in hospitals that weren't just nurses. And not that there's anything wrong. I my whole love and support for nurses, but like the idea that you were like put into one role and only allowed to do that one role was starting to be broken. And so when I think about that and I think about her really wanting a daughter, I think, well, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like I went through this thing. I want to be able to protect and raise a young woman knowing my experiences. So I don't falter for what at times was a frustrating um projection onto me. But I also am so glad she has grandchildren to do it with because that wasn't the experience I needed. And I think that's fundamentally like what I'm getting at is like what you need is like often projected onto you when you're a child.
Mhm.
So asking, can I get this schmutz off your face is good because if that's not your need in that moment and you're like, no, I'm still eating, or no, I'm like, I don't want to rag in my face right now, that's good because that's you saying your needs at a very young age. And if you start really young, God willing, like that's something you have throughout your life. And, also God willing, like people listen. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It was really interesting to sort of go through that journey. Sorry, that was such an aside, but
I love, I live, I laugh. This is wonderful because I could so identify with the whole schmutz situation. Like my niece and her boogers is a whole story. Do you know what I mean? Like of her having that voice, right?
yeah,
And that's what I hear you saying is like, what was it like as a child to find a voice, especially as a queer trans child, to be able to express yourself through clothes, to be able to express yourself through your wants, your desires, your ideas. I really appreciate you sharing that about your mom because I had a similar experience where it took my mom some time to understand and to find understanding of my voice. And when she did, and now that she does, it's like she might as well be wearing the rainbow flag 24/7. Do you know what I mean? She's like,
yeah, mine's the same. I
they're
have
gay, they're
the
trans, they're
Yeah,
non-binary, like they're so wonderful. And that evolution of a parent is mind-blowing to me.
yeah,
And I want to dig more into that voice, right? Like we're having conversation as voiceover artists, as human beings. And I'm wondering, like, when did you figure out that you could create characters through your with your voice in that way? Because I like for me it was like Lego, I
yeah.
used Lego figures to be like, oh, look at you, look at me, haha, we're talking. And then toys and stuff like that. Was it similar for you, or what was that experience?
It's so interesting. I was really into Mine was really private. Like, yes, I made little films with my friends and played different characters, but, I was not outwardly always doing voices. In my room, I would practice my British accent, which is not improved. I would practice, like, all these different accents that I heard on television. I would, like, read the lines from a movie over and over again. I really loved being able to immerse myself. So it was interesting because I do feel creative in the characters I make now, but I think as a child, I was really informed by media. So it's fascinating because I did have the urge to be characters, but I think the most actor thing about me, though as an adult I love writing and creating, was I was like, I need to like capture the essence of this character, you know?
Mm.
So when I did it, I went for it all and I would just be in my room and reciting things and doing different voices, and I think I chalk up the privacy of it to, um, knowing or being hyper aware of how I was received, which I think is a queer thing. Like, I think often my editing in public was from the feedback I got when I didn't. And I've always a little bit chatted and said a few things I shouldn't. I still get feedback on it. Like, I have a little bit of a loud mouth and um not a very restrictive censor box or whatever. Um but I think that an interesting thing is that in spite of that I was so hyper aware of being like a cool kid that I really like was so selective about what I shared. Which you wouldn't believe if you saw me as a kid because I was a chatterbox, but like I mean, just that's a testament to like the kind of like really innate repression was that I could talk, 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 but there would never be like a Freudian slip of me being like, and I want to be a boy, you know, because I was so like, that's for me. No one needs to know. I'm gonna pray
Mm.
about that quietly tonight, you know? Um, and so I do think my art is sort of similar to that, where like, and doing characters as an adult and getting them to develop too. I mean, that was the thing you don't even think about as a kid is like you just think of this character, and because you haven't gone through life and you haven't gone through trials and tribulations, you don't understand what it means to start with a character and end with a character. So like working in the animated world and having a character that starts out a certain way and then ends a certain way. I mean, I really for the first time in my life, because it was also the biggest piece of like meat that I was given as an actor, was like, oh my God, this person's going to be different when they're done with their journey. So I need to make that sound like that.
Hmm.
Um, and you just don't have that perspective as a kid. You don't have the perspective that life goes on, especially if you're queer. You're like, well, I'm miserable now, so that'll probably be true. So why would I develop? You know, and I don't think you're even thinking of that hard, you know, but I'm sure subconsciously that's sort of the cogs that are moving about are very not well oiled and sort of grating against each other, being like, what does the future look like for me? Um, so yeah, I don't know. Sorry, that was a little bit of a like I maybe read
No.
between the lines a little too much on that question, but I really think I the way I imagined characters was so reflective of what I considered my parents, which was the television. Um, like that was the world
Mm.
to me.
Ooh, yes. I really appreciate you going down that road because it makes me think of you know, those subconscious thoughts, right? That we have as children and then we continue to have as adults around, especially when you're queer, about being you know, that repression, that shame, that like healing that shame in time, right? That takes a lot of growing up. And I think that that's something that I always want young people to remember is that I remember, do you remember that It Gets Better campaign back in the day?
Yes.
Like that was the quintessential lifesaver for me. You know, I was like, it
Yeah.
does get better. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? They get to have role models like you, a man who is like, you know, not just accomplished in their field, but he's, you know, you are like our mutual friends, our colleagues love you with such a fervor. You know, you are such a lovable person. And I think that that's what is a testament to those thoughts and those hard feelings that keep us, you know, in our little box, sort of growing up and bursting out of that and
Yeah.
becoming the person that the people that we are today, right?
Hmm.
You made me think earlier about the little pink Barbie shoes that I would wear. They like had, I remember them vividly. And self-expression was a huge part of my work as an educator, but also as an actor. I played Angel a couple times and Rent. And um, so when I was beginning my work in the animation world, I recognized like, oh wait, I'm a robot, or I'm a ghost, or I'm the voice of a Sesame Street character, or whatever it is. And I'm wondering for you, what self-expression through these characters, like you're describing, the character changes from beginning to end, right? From point A to point B. Um, like when Barney falls in love and like finds that whole relationship, it's beautiful. Um, and I'm referring to Dead End Paranormal Park for those of you who are watching, which is an incredible show that Zach stars on, and has created this this model for young people to aspire to be, in terms of, you know, the relationship that your character has with their parents, how that evolves, your
Yeah.
relationship that your character has with the other characters. um uh you know, you and Alex Brightman developed such an incredible relationship on just through your voices. It's really beautiful to see that, and so I'm wondering, or to hear that. um I'm wondering what self-expression through these characters was like. Did you like walk out of the booth ever and you're like, wow, I'm like kind of like this character, or they're kind of like me? Like, was that ever a thought?
I have always said this. My favorite thing about Barney is how selfish he could be, because I mean, otherwise you just have this like boring model of a person who is chipper all the time and always going to be the hero and make the right choice. I mean, he's like really a teen, you know? And I think so lucky on some level that he gets to, in the space that he's playing in at the park, um, be a jerk without the consequences being unpopular at high school. I mean, I love the model of the show because the consequences normally of being that way is you lose friends and whatever. But when you're a bunch of weirdos who only have each other, the stakes when you hurt each other is high in a different way, but
Mhm.
so queer. Like fundamentally, the show is queer because it wasn't like the stakes were becoming unpopular in high school, because that wasn't like the stakes for a lot of people in high school who are queer. The stakes weren't becoming unpopular. You were often going in there that way. The stakes were um like maintaining chosen family and not totally putting them off of me when I don't inherently immediately choose to think of them as much as myself. And that's like a thing that we learn growing up, often in social situations at school, what have you, through consequences. As far as I understand, we've been doing it since ages before. I mean, when people would get like shunned from communities for stealing, that was like the early examples of shame, was like, oh, if I do something wrong, there are consequences, and how people view me and my place in society. And when you're ostracized or other, your experience of learning those things looks really different. So I love that Barney got to play with those kind of tools in a new space. You know, the show doesn't take place at school. It takes place at um, a haunted theme park. So the rules are different. He gets to be selfish, and the consequences aren't, I'm not popular there. My best friend, who is his dog, my fundamental support in life, and the only piece of family I have with me, doesn't trust me. That's so heavy. And it's so beautiful because it also ups the stakes for him growing. And I mean, from season one to season two, the way he responds to Pugly being in distress is so different. Um, you know, Pugsley getting scared of the doors on the tram in episode, I think two, um, of the show, what were three. Um, you know, Pugsley's like on this train and Barney's so into this boy that he's not paying attention, and Pugsley gets stuck on the train and they lose track of each other, and it's such a mess over something so silly about a boy. Um, which is why men are a problem. No, I'm just kidding. No. But it's and then in season 2, when Pugsley's having problems with, fingers, this character who's nefarious, um, Barney sits him down and is like, "You are worth so much more than what this guy says." And
Mhm.
I think learning to approach conflict differently is so fundamental to found family, chosen family, in a way that you learn more inherently when you have family that you mesh with better. And when you're queer and that's not happening, particularly Barney's situation, it's thank God he has a place to learn that. And
Yeah.
I always really admired the way that the relationship with the parents was, because he's right in so many regards, and I think it'd be so easy to go, his parents don't protect him from like people who are really hateful to him. Of course he ran away, but he's also being a brat. Like,
Mhm.
it's also really difficult for adults to stand up to their own parents, and he didn't have patience for that, and maybe he didn't shouldn't be expected to as a 16-year-old, but he's also growing up, and part of that is like letting people get to where they need to get. And so it's interesting, it's the way he like learns to be forgiving and that they learn to stand up for him is really beautiful.
The complexity in a 16-year-old and yet the like beautiful simplicity of a 16-year-old, like the that I hear you describing is what excites me about characters like Barney. It's like you said, we could play this character one way and fit this trope of what a teenager should be, but what you do so beautifully is illustrate a character that is so, from like first appearance, when you look at, like, if you look at images from the show, he's like fun, wild, and crazy, but then you also get to learn the depths of Zach through the character, right? The things that you're describing about your experience, like the insecurity, the shame, the things that this character processes. It's just so beautiful to me when I have a conversation with someone and they talk about how their character, they talk about their character and then they talk about themselves, and the not just the similarities but the sort of gifts that we offer each character that we play, because for all of time that we know it, as long as the polar ice caps don't melt before our end of our lives, we will have Barney, you know what I mean? We will have these characters that are you know what, aliens will come and find the content, so they will live on forever. Barney will live on forever. um um you know so on that note of a 16-year-old, like, what would you say to a 16-year-old voiceover artist who's like, because I talk to these kids all the time. I have clients and I'm like, oh, you really want to do this, so if you could say something that 16-year-old, or that 60-year-old who's like, I want to do voiceover for the first time right now and I'm 60 and I'm going to do it, what would you say to help ease the road for them?
I haven't worked in a little bit and it's hard. And so I've been brought back to the place of what it feels like to be hungry and waiting for the next opportunity. So on some level, I feel really in the right space to be answering this. I This time around, because I've done this before, I am enjoying myself so much more. I have so much fun coming up with characters. I spend way more time on the breakdowns. If I get a breakdown for a character I'm auditioning for, I spend like time with it, and I'm like, what is the most fun, interesting take on this that feels really true and authentic? I'm not just making it up to be interesting, but like that's what this character is. Um, and it's actually so fun. Our job is so fun because even when you're not picked to do it forever, you get to do it for a little bit. And it's fun. I love playing pretend. And this is my dream job for a reason. Like, acting is my favorite thing to do on earth. And even if I think it's a Philip Seymour Hoffman quote that I'm thinking of, but he was just talking about how, like, if you're only given 10 minutes in a room, then act like you're only given 10 minutes in a room. There's got to be an urgency and you have to do the best you can because you only have 10 minutes in a room. And I think auditions, without the pressure of that means you need to be perfect, if maybe reforming it to be like, you only have 10 minutes to have fun today. That's not true, obviously, but you have 10 minutes to play on the playground. Have fun on the playground. And also, as we talked about, how early I was creating characters and how early I was afraid to create characters, like I said, there were times when I put voices to my characters and there were times I didn't, and I was just mimicking things. I mean, put voices to things early and have faith that you are entitled to and an expert on what people are like, because you're drawing from your own experience and therefore you have a perspective that is super valid. Because when I first started acting, I didn't actually think I was very good, and I think that reflects in my early work. I think I wasn't very good because I didn't trust that I was smart enough or talented enough to know what that meant, like what a character would be like. I didn't think I had reading comprehension skills. I didn't think I had the ability to portray something. And I mean, just like have faith that you are a smart enough, more like well indoctrinated into the like world person, that your opinion about what a person would be like is justified enough to put that on tape or put that on camera. Um, and that someone will see it and relate, because they will, because it's honest. And um and I just think, a really funny thing. I talk about this. I did a silly little speech one day for I do public speaking as like a part of like what I do, because it's one of my favorite things to do. And I gave this speech once and I was talking about how some of my earliest expression was through Club Penguin with like being a boy. My best friend went on one time and made a new account and like caught me pretending to be a boy. And it was so mortifying. But in retrospect, I mean, I was so scared to be creative. I was so scared to play with what I wanted to play with. I mean, don't be afraid to do that. And I think I'm just gonna use like X-Men 97 as an example. Like we have like queer like representation in the show, and that comic books have been around since forever. There are gonna be people who read characters differently throughout time. But like the like message of X-Men has always been being different is like okay, and portraying it a certain way isn't like, it's not like a take that like could be disputed. Like, no, I didn't read the character that way. Like, this is the version of the character. This
Mhm.
character is queer. Um, you not reading it that way doesn't mean the person who chose to portray it is wrong. It doesn't mean the people who are writing it are wrong. It means it is like a different version of an experience. So if that's true, then it's definitely true that when you go into an audition, your choices are valid. Like, and I think that's something that nobody ever told me, was when you're acting, the choices you make are like positive, true choices. You are entitled and experienced and justified in every choice you make. That doesn't
Mhm.
mean every choice will work. I just think it means like make things make sense to you first.
Yes. You just reminded me, I had an audition the other day and I went and, insta stalked someone that I met who was such a sweetheart after. And on his profile, it said, audition as if nobody's watching. It's that whole like dance as if nobody's watching thing
Yeah.
that's like quote unquote. But it's so real. You helped me recognize how real that is. If I have my 10 minutes in the room, it's like it's my 10 minutes to play and be myself and I can relate to the auditioning a lot and finding joy in that. So taking that time to relate to the character, to find the character within yourself is like it's the gift of the process. It's a gift
Yeah.
of being an artist and recognizing that there are going to be ups and downs. Joe Grafazzi, this incredible actor, when I first started working out of college, said to me, "Is like there are going to be some high points and there are going to be some low points. Some days you're going to work, some days you're not." And I don't know if he smoked cigarettes, but that felt the most appropriate. Um, but then also thinking about a character like JP Carliac's Morph.
That's what I was thinking of, Morphia.
We love JP. I gotta get JP on here. Hey JP. I think of watching that show and being like, that is an expression of their experience and his experience, his identity, but I could so easily see myself reflected in it, you know? And it's that validation that I see happening in animation. And for characters like Barney, like Morph, like Nightshade, these characters that are just representing people and robots and
Yeah.
superheroes as they exist, right? That like we exist, we are here, um we are queer and we are here to stay. We have always been here. And the fact that animation is a world where our voices can be heard and our identities can be developed, right? Because that's something I'm hearing from you too, is like what you're learning from the process as an actor about yourself, right? That's what's beautiful about it. I remember someone said to me once, they were like, the only real profession the most realistic profession is acting, because it is a career, or show business, right? It is a career where something begins and it ends constantly. And isn't that life, right? Just beginnings and endings. My dad worked in the same place for 45 years and now he's in a different place in his life. But for 45 years, he had that one beginning and then ending. And it's
Yeah.
so beautiful to just to watch him in his place in life. So those who don't do voiceover, like, recognize your beginnings and your endings.
Yeah.
And with that said, we have reached the ending of our time, crazily. I want to give you the last word and just want to say, before I ask this last question, how grateful I am for everything that you do as an artist, as a person of kindness, silliness, working with you and being on the same shows as you has been a real privilege to be able to say, like, I work with Zach. Like, he's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I feel the same way. Yeah.
oh, thank you. And so the thing I want to ask you in terms of like kindness and love, like, if you were to imagine the like a kind, loving future and voiceover in the entertainment industry in general, what would you suggest we do, or I can do, or you can do, to bring that love and kindness to an industry that sometimes is a little jagged?
Yeah. I think one of my favorite things about doing the college tapes with you, and I also had this experience with Dead End, was having such direct contact with like the head honcho. Like Lauren was like there for everything, and I think having the person who like largely conceptualized it and people that have worked on it for a really long time. I mean, the development of family is so fundamental to an actual project, and the thing that made me the like happiest during Dead End was getting to know Hamish and our director Christy and like some of the Netflix folks and the producers and everything, Jen and Annie, and just like I loved familiar faces, and I wish that we had all gotten to be in the same room at one point, all the actors, because what we got to do on the college tapes where we had all the actors on was so fun. Like it was so much fun, and I really believed I was there, um, and I want that. Like I want it to be collaborative, but I think what I'm actually trying to get at is I think animation right now more than ever, and I think we can, not to get too political, but like the fact that like the animation guild um like made their contract before the strikes happened and like therefore like got a short end of a deal on some level. Like I don't think animation is quite respected at all in a lot of aspects of the industry. I mean, voice actors get no pay, voice or animation writers get no pay. Like streaming services have loads of power, and I think um, my dream is that we're given a budget where you can put all the actors in the same room, fly them out from New York. Like if we had had Alex from New York, and Coco Peru from New York, and we could have all been in the room for the episodes if like that is a budget that should be afforded to animation because it does change the quality. And when you get a big movie production, sometimes they will occasionally, I don't know how often it happens anymore, but they'll put all the actors in the room and it's like that's how you make a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the product quality, we've managed to through our skills and our showrunner skills and our writer skills and our director skills, still produce something so wonderful. And I think Dead End is a great example. Like, we made such a cool show without being in the same room, but like, there was no reason to have to do that. You know what I mean? And I think fundamentally, I just want more respect put on the industry. I want the people who make this stuff to get like Oscars. Like, I don't think I'm not saying like it needs to exist in the same category, but like, it's so weird that like kids animation is like a daytime Emmy and not, you know what I mean? Like, it's like the amount of work being asked by these teeny tiny writers rooms that like they keep making smaller and smaller, and these freelance writers who have to do a script in a day. I mean, it's really rude. It's not nice. Like, you should not treat people that way if you want them to make content for you. Um, and I have so many people I know that I love with my whole heart who love making kids television, love making animation, and are told that that has less value. And I know that it's cyclic, right? Like, I am understanding of the fact that those things might make less money sometimes. But I also happen to know that some of the biggest like ways that merch is made is through children. So I also think it's cyclic in the way that like people often will say with women's sports, well, it doesn't get watched as much, so then there's less ad time. So then the ads make the companies less money, and that's why we'll never get the same viewership. And it's like, well, actually, like, and this is like academically proven. Like, I had to read loads of it for my undergrad, loads of articles on like women's sports and the cycle of like advertising. I mean, it started with people aren't going to watch this as much. It didn't start with nobody's watching it and the ads aren't there. It started with we assume no one will watch it, so we are not going to give it ads. We are not going
Mm-hmm.
to give it sponsorships. We are not. And that is how I think often animation is treated too. And like queer animation and queer people is the assumption that this won't get off the ground, so why give it all the support it needs? But that's just not true. Um, and that's where the cycle always starts in the assumption that this is not as good. This does not have the same value. So my dream is that our art is valued, you know, and particularly the queer people who do it, because I'm gonna tell you something. Every day I get a text from my brother being like, so my oldest brother hasn't watched X-Men 97, and we're in a group chat, and my oldest brother keeps trying to make jokes in the group chat, and my other brother Michael and Jacob, they're like, oh, we're not playing with you right now. And he's like, why? And they're like, we're not playing with you because you haven't watched X-Men 97. And he's like, I wanted to just make a joke. And they're like, no, you don't get to play with us until you watch it, because they love it so much. And this is a show we're talking about that my like straight brother Michael is obsessed with, that has this like wonderful, like, has JP doing more. Like, I don't know. My point is like people will watch it. People will invest in it. You're wrong. You know, my brother is like in his 30s and it's his favorite thing he's watched in ages. Like, you're wrong about the value of this. Not you, but the proverbial you. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, Zach, what a way to leave the ellipses on the sentence, because this conversation is only beginning. I'm so grateful again for your time. For those of you watching, follow Zach on Instagram and all those things. I'll leave a little message after this, like I did the first episode. Oh my God, episode 2. And thank you for watching. Well, you'll hear more on the other end. Love you, Zach. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 2 of Raise the Game featuring Zach Barrick. Be sure to follow them on all of those social medias at Zach Barrick. He is an incredible artist and incredible human being, as you've learned. Be sure to get involved in your communities. Be sure to get involved in your families, and be sure to tell someone that you love them. Thank you so much for joining us again for episode 2 of Raise the Game. We'll see you next time.